V Crum III runs a podcast called Conscious Millionaire. And what I find so interesting about him is he achieved his monetary goal at about 25, 26 years old. And he sold his first business at 40. He wouldn't tell me the exact number of years. I want to guess it was like 20 years ago. So I wanted to have him on the podcast to talk about what that's like. How long life is one of the main things we talked about. We also talked about decisions he would make if he had to do it again. We talked about finding a purpose and how to deal with those feelings of freedom, how to deal with all the extra time when you're successful. It's a very interesting topic. I think only becomes appealing once you are a successful entrepreneur. So it's never covered. I've never heard this covered before. So check it out. Enjoy. This is my interview with V Crum III. Get into it. And I wanted to have JV on the podcast because, well, first of all, welcome to the podcast, JV.
Well, thank you, Alex. And hello to everybody who's listening. I'm glad you're here with us.
I wanted to talk to JV because I've been on his show and he mentioned these little nuggets. Like, for instance, we were talking, it was video chat, and he started just calling out the paintings that were behind me. And it turns out, JV, you were an art collector at one point, right?
In fact, it's interesting. As we record this, there's one night a month here in Denver that's called Art Walk. And when I finish this, I am headed off to spend several hours going on multiple blocks between art galleries and just hanging out with other people who like art.
And that's so amazing. So what I wanted to talk about today is you said you sold your first company. It was a multi-million-dollar exit in your 40s, right?
Yeah, 41.
And that was dozens of years ago. I don't know the exact amount of years, but that was a while ago.
Dozens is a real exaggeration. Folks, I am not Moses, okay? Let's just make that clear here. But it was more than a year ago.
JV's pushing 535 years ago.
I actually was around to part the sea. Well, imagine the difference between that and then you get on these mega boats. I'm not talking mega yachts. I'm talking about, where 2,000 people get on a boat and are sailing around with each other for a week. I mean, those are cities. I've been on, I went out of Venice, friend's birthday, a whole bunch of us flew over there and we did Venice, we did Greek Isles, we did Turkey. And, the thing was a friggin' city. It was so big.
Yeah. What brand was that?
That was Royal Caribbean. And
so Royal Caribbean, I've been on a bunch of these too. It really is. They actually built, in a lot of them, they have a model of a city in the middle, like a big open courtyard.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's like little coffee shops. They even have outdoor seating inside the ship. It's insane.
It is, 20,000. But there probably are like 12 restaurants. That's probably realistic.
And even the main buffet the buffet and the main restaurant you have to go to is just so high quality, on top of the super high quality ones that cost extra.
Yes, the super special dinner.
Well, so I wanted to talk about what it means to make $1 million at 20, right? Because you're a self-made millionaire in your 20s. And I also want to talk about what it means to exit at 40 and then life keeps going. So talk to me a little bit about that. How did it feel when you exited your business and what was going through your head at that point?
Yeah, so that's a really important question. So the reason I exited was that I hated what I was doing, felt no meaning or purpose, and wanted to go out and find it. So that's literally why I did that. So I said, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be doing something that adds purpose and value in a way that I'm particularly meant to on this planet. So I immediately went and traveled. I went and lived at a Buddhist monastery. I lived at Esalen Institute, which is on the Big Sur coast in California. It's where the human potential movement began. And then I kind of combined the two and went and lived in Boulder because maybe everybody doesn't know, but Boulder has more Buddhists per capita than any other place in the United States, has the only Buddhist university. And the whole place is like a complete human potential institute. And then I'd go camping for 2 and 3 weeks at a time on what I called my own personally crafted vision quests and asking the singular question, why am I here and how can I take all the talents I've managed to acquire and use them for greater good to help other people in the planet and make this a better world? And so that was kind of like the big pivot in my life, is that I wanted to go answer that question. And what appeared when I was spending 6 months skiing Lake Tahoe, which is not the worst thing to spend 6 months doing, by the way, during that time period was when I got in a hot tub and Conscious Millionaire literally came to me in my forehead. I saw the phrase, I got a tingling in my spine, and I said, by golly, that's it. And it was. So that was the journey of finding the reason I'm here.
So while you're doing all this stuff, you're in Lake Tahoe, you're doing all this. Is there a guilt associated with that? Is there like a fear that you're not delivering enough value? Because you worked very hard to get to that point.
Yeah, that's an interesting question you'd ask. And actually, it's the first time anybody's asked that to me. I've never felt guilty about anything I've accomplished or guilty about anything I haven't accomplished. I think some people are set up to have like lots of guilt, and I'm not a guilt person. So it's not actually a feeling I ever have.
So for me, it was, we were doing really well with our agency, and we got to the point where I was working like barely any time, like maybe 30 minutes a week for a good 7-8 month period. And so I started doing like art, and I started doing comedy. I was doing stand-up comedy for like, I did over 100 and something shows.
I want to congratulate you on that. Seriously, because I have kind of a wicked dry sense of humor. And so I thought I'd be really good at stand-up comedy. So the stand-up comedy club near me gave free lessons because they were looking for, new talent, blah, blah, local talent. And I tried to do stand-up comedy, and I was really shocked at actually how hard it was. I thought because I have a good sense of humor, it'd be easy, but actually doing the bunch, punch is, and the setup to all that, it's actually, I thought it was very hard.
Yeah, it's extremely hard. It's a lot easier with a real audience than it is at open mics too. So if you get like 10, 15 comedians in a room, I found it's terrifying. But just a couple times I've gotten to perform at like the Comedy Store or whatever, where it's an audience that really wants to laugh, it's a lot easier, but it's still not the easiest thing I've ever done.
I certainly recommend that if you want to try that, to go try it. But I just want to commend you for actually doing it.
So for me, I really wanted to do comedy for a really long time. And that was like the thing, like, well, I hated my main job, like hated in quotes, because I thought it was okay the whole time. But like, I had this thing in the back of my mind, like I wanted to write movies, I wanted to do entertainment stuff. So I finally got the chance to do that. And then, I don't know, I felt a strong push against the person I used to be. You didn't experience anything like that? Like, what are you doing when you're on Lake Tahoe for 6 months? What are you thinking that whole time?
Other than skiing, because early on in that, but early on, so this was, I think it was November, but it could have been October. So very early on in that 6 months was when I discovered Conscious Millionaire. So then I was thinking about, well, what is Conscious Millionaire? I actually created my first audio program about Conscious Millionaire. But what was interesting is the night that all came to me, I actually said to myself, wow, this is my assignment. And it's really cool because Conscious Millionaire was a very cool phrase. And I could see, wow, this is going to be very, very interesting. But what was interesting is that from whence all this comes, let's just say the universe decided to reveal this to me. And it was an inspired thought. I certainly say that's true. But from wherever the inspiration came, what it actually was didn't also come along with. So there was no, like, I wrote the book, but I had to write the book. And in writing the book, I had to figure out, what is this? Like, what does this all stand for? And how does it all come to be? And who is it for? And what's the path? I had to create all that. Now, there was a lot of inspiration in that, but it wasn't like I got the inspired Conscious Millionaire and then the manual appeared. I actually had to create the manual and in the process figure out what this was. But what I did know immediately that appealed to me was that because I'd made that first million, and grown up in this little country town of 200 or 300 people and had been relatively poor, relative is kind of a crazy word to put with that. But I thought that, like many people, especially in our culture, we're told even today that if you just get the money, somehow everything else is perfect. And I had the good experience of having the new 4-story home and the Mercedes on the water and all that kind of good stuff. And it only took me 3 months to have a total meltdown one day, looking out, beautiful bay, sailboats, palm trees in my front lawn, and realizing that something was dreadfully wrong. and that the picture didn't work and that I was actually unhappy. And I said things to myself like, I don't even like myself and I'm not good at relationships. And all I did was figure out how to make money. And that really was the most important experience I could have had. It wasn't having the beautiful home, as wonderful as that was, because I'd never had that. It was realizing that there's something more and I've got to go find it. And that something more is living your life with a greater sense of purpose, that there's a greater good to that you're on the planet to commit yourself to, and that each one of us has a different part to play in that. And that to me is the miracle of life, because I think life is a total miracle. I mean, if you try to logically understand everything that's going on planet Earth and all the different animals and how we all fit together and all the different parts of, how the planet and then just how everything works, and then how the big shifts that we're making right now, it is a miracle. I mean, it's like there's magic that goes on with synchronicity, and all of this is such an important part of building a business and being an entrepreneur. But to be able to realize that you're here to do something big with your life. I think most people in their lives not having done that big something they're here to do. And the reason I focus, like you, on entrepreneurs is that entrepreneurs are here to play big. I think that's why we're on the planet. We're here to create the new models of services and products that human beings need, because we're providing something that uplifts them and transforms them and positively impacts them. And if that's your focus as an entrepreneur, I think therein lies the purpose of doing something that has a higher good, that helps people in a bigger way. And out of that, your wealth is built.
I think it's really interesting too what you're doing, where you're helping other entrepreneurs. Like, you're a make money type of guy, but you're also conscious. And the reason why I bring that up is you didn't like start a nonprofit to cure malaria, right? Like, you're doing something that you love, which is helping people make money. Like, it's not like you ditched that entire part of your life. It's still very much a part of what you're doing.
Yes, it is very much a part. And to play off of that, part of my purpose is to help us transition to a different way of looking at capitalism, a different way of looking at commerce and building businesses, because what I call first stage capitalism is really, it's just about the bottom line. But second stage capitalism, there are lots of different ways you can envision the bottom line. What all of them have this in common: it's about making a positive impact. It's about doing something bigger than it's only about the money. It's about doing something that you personally, as the entrepreneur, feels really matters. And out of that, creating money and financial success as well. That, to me, is what this whole second stage of capitalism is all about.
And when you say the word, or when you say the phrase, doing something that really matters, what does that mean?
Well, I use the term widget in kind of a derogatory means, and I recently realized that some people use widget in a positive way. Well, I actually don't. So I just use widget to mean that product or even service, but it's typically associated with a product that is fungible. In other words, your product and somebody else's product and somebody else's product are pretty much, consumer could buy any one of these, and your only goal is to see how many widgets you can sell, right? And that's the outcome, and that's first stage capitalism. Let's just find a widget, create a marketing program to get people to buy it, and then our whole goal is to see how many of these we can sell. I've actually never talked about this on any podcast, including my own, but let's think about, who better to dig today than the cigarette companies, right? Can you think of anything positive these companies are actually creating in the world? They actually manufacture things, sell them, get people to buy them, to give them cancer, of all things, right? So that's the perfect kind of thing to think about. In first stage capitalism, it didn't matter whether it was good for people, good for the planet, made people healthy, actually made them healthier, helped them live longer. It was just, could we get them to buy it? That was all that they cared about. Well, there's a whole new movement today, and that's what Conscious Millionaire is about. It's like, folks, that's no way to live your life. And by the way, you will not find meaning and purpose in selling those kind of products and services. You won't, right? So if you want to find meaning and purpose, you must sell something that positively impacts other people and then see, well, how does that fit into this bigger purpose that I feel drawn to do? And let's just define purpose, because I think a lot of people grapple with that for a long time. I talk about it in my book, and I grappled with it for a long time. And now I've got it down to such a science that if it takes me 3 weeks to help somebody find their purpose, I've spent a little too long, because I now know exactly how to go for it. And it really comes down to, what is the difference that you want to make, and for whom or for what do you want to make that difference? That's what purpose is all about. It's making a bigger difference than you are, and it's outward. It's always outward focused. It's not about you. It's about what you can give. That's what gives us meaning as human beings. And I think until you as an entrepreneur grasp that fully and then design your business to be of service to other people, but you design it so that you're serving them and making exactly the kind of positive impact that they want. But it's a positive impact. It's what they're missing. It's what they're yearning for. It's what they deeply actually want to buy from you. And that's why they will buy it. And that's why they will pay you high prices, because you're giving high value to them by transforming their life or helping them go to a higher level than they are today. That, to me, is the future of commerce. And in my opinion, nothing else should ever be sold, because there's no reason to sell things that degrade people or even keep them at the same level they're at. What's really valuable is when we as entrepreneurs find ways to sell services and products that uplift other human beings. And out of that, by golly, we get wealthy while they get what they wanted, and the world is better off. That's what I think is the future of entrepreneurship. That's why I'm in this business.
And I agree that there's a way to do that. When you were in your 40s, you did that exit. What was that business that you hated?
The great thing about it, because there's a great thing about everything, is that it's a really hard business. I mean, you have to do everything right to make it work. And that's a great training ground to learn how to be an entrepreneur. The really horrible thing was that I didn't feel like I was adding any meaning to anybody's life. And I certainly didn't get any meaning in mine, because I didn't feel like what we did in our case mattered that much.
At the time, you didn't get any meeting, but it set you up. I mean, it set you up for this entire exploratory period.
It did. But what if, Alec, you made that same money, but you made that money and you skipped the phase where you do something that doesn't give you meaning? And I think that's what happened when Conscious Millionaire was inspired to me, is that I realized, and I've talked about this some lately, and I've talked to a number of entrepreneurs, and I think this is really true. A lot of entrepreneurs who really are purpose or conscious driven, they want to do something that they feel matters. A lot of times it's tied to a wound that we have as human beings. For instance, my wound was spending 18 years doing something that every day grated against my soul and in no way enlivened me. And I wanted to save people from that, having to do that. Let's just skip right into make your money in a way that fulfills you, adds value to other people. That's a purpose, conscious driven business, and makes money. And then just don't do anything that doesn't fulfill your soul, because I can assure you of this. If right now you're listening and you're going, wait a minute, to yourself, not to me, I really feel like what I'm doing doesn't fulfill me at all, I can assure you, you are not living on purpose. And by that, I mean your purpose, because every person that I've helped, I want to say, kind of talk like Matrix for a moment, liberate their mind, just like I'm always working to liberate my mind to a higher stage and find the deeper truth inside of themselves. Every person that I know of and every person I've ever helped find their purpose, it always feels fulfilling to them, and they always thrive and feel more alive. They never feel like they're grinding just to get up in the morning. And if that's how you feel, you're not on the right path yet.
I hate most business content out there because they don't deliver enough value. It's almost like they're trying to give you as little as possible so they can sell you on a course. And I've hated this business content for years now. So in order to fix that, I decided to start making content on my own. And that's what we focus on the Alex Berman YouTube channel. They're in-depth business tutorials, takeaways, real email scripts that we have taken and we've learned from doing sales for almost a decade now, having generated hundreds of millions of dollars in leads for our clients and millions of dollars in sales for them. So we're giving all of this stuff away for free. You can get a playlist of our most helpful videos on b2bsalestraining.org. It'll go right to the YouTube channel, or youtube.com/Alex Berman. And once you get to that channel, it's not enough to just watch the videos. Give it a subscribe. And I would love to see you around. Right now we post 3 videos a week. We've been doing that for the last 4 years. See you soon.
Whatever you're optimizing for, you can get better at.
I would just be booked solid at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 18 years of like working as hard as you did at trucking on anything else, like even making movies or like, which is literally any skill you pick. So I think that is a huge tragedy of life, that people go for the money.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about it now that you say it, because we pulled on average 12,000 loads a year. So that's a couple of 100,000 loads. And gosh, I'd rather have helped 200,000 people tap into their potential and do something they found fulfilling with their life. I wish that I had actually utilized that energy that way.
That's interesting. Yeah. So if you were to go back, like, let's say you were giving yourself advice, what would you have done instead of what you did? Or would you do the trucking thing?
Well, it's a very tough question. And I'm glad you asked it, because it allows us an opportunity to explore the difficulties of being a human being. So I took over the family business that my father had at 23 and turned it around. And I did it not because I had the slightest interest in being there, but I did it because I loved and cared about my dad. And then I stayed because I created all these systems, because I'm a very deep systems thinker. And so the company was just built on elaborate systems, and he didn't think systems. So I couldn't actually walk away and say, okay, now I've got it all set up for you. I'm going to go do what I want, which I tried to do. It just didn't work out because I realized he couldn't actually run it. So then I stayed that extra 12 years because I went to law school and ran the company for 3 of the years. And then I was going to go practice corporate and tax law. And I stayed and didn't do that. And that's one of those existential questions, because there's no right or wrong. Would I have, in hindsight, abandoned my dad knowing that he didn't know how to do this or take care of himself on those levels, which I chose not to do? But if I had to do it again, would I actually do that? And I actually can't answer that question because I'm not sure, because it all sounds so easy. Well, you've got to go live your purpose. Yeah. But then there's something called life and family love and obligations, and that makes life complicated.
My advice, if I was talking to you and someone was dealing with that problem, would be find an outside CEO that could handle the business. But it's not like you had the internet. It's not like you could even think that way back then.
I was interviewing someone yesterday. Just skip the name. His program will come out, but he's 21, right? So his life is entirely defined by the internet, right? Whereas I have this segment of my life that was not defined by the internet. And now I still believe technology has the most to do with the wealth I'll create and the impact that I'll make with entrepreneurs. But there is a perspective. So I'll share something, because this will sound like it came from the time of the Romans or something. I grew up in a little country town, as I've said, and we had, I'm curious if you know what this is. I ran into one person that did know what it was. We had an 8-party line. What was an 8-party line?
Actually, I think I know what this is. So like before the telephone company had a phone line for every house, they had like one phone line for an entire block, and then people had to kind of trade off.
We had 8 houses that shared the exact same phone line. And if you wanted to make a call, you'd have to pick up the phone, see if somebody was talking, and then ask them if they would get off so you could make a phone call. It sounds impossible when we're all running around with Star Trek-like gadgets in our hands called cell phones, in my case, an iPhone, and that's how we go to I don't even go to the friggin' gym without it, right? It's my communication device, right? Except that I seldom make a phone call on it. It's mainly accessing some form of the internet, which is kind of even more funny. But Yeah. So all of that really defines things. And you're right. So it was a little bit harder in that chapter of my life to go, well, somebody else could have stepped in and taken on the role that I took on. The reason I'm also bringing this because it's not just could you have found a CEO? It's about emotional bonds and emotional relationships and emotional sense of obligation. It's like when my father got sick with Parkinson's, I had my life all going out in Colorado and I went back to Florida. And I had a lot of friends that said, how could you possibly just give up your life? And I said, how could I possibly not take care of my dad? Like, who else was going to make sure the bills were paid? Who else was going to make sure that he was okay? Nobody, actually. So there's complexities to life that on paper you don't put down, but in reality can dictate a whole lot of things that happen and influence what occurs for us as entrepreneurs.
Have you ever seen that Julianne Moore movie, Still Alice, where she had Alzheimer's?
I've only seen parts of it. I've actually not seen the whole movie. It looked quite good.
I thought I had Alzheimer's by the end of it. It was so realistic. But no, there's there's a daughter in that movie that does the exact same thing. So like she gives up her life as an actress to move back with the mom, and at the end of that movie, it like cuts it like she's thrown her entire life away. But I think what's so beautiful about life in general is you were able to do that. You put things together for your dad. You worked in this business. You sold this business like 18 years, and yet you still had, I mean, there's still so much time left after that.
Well, one of the things that I talk about a lot, it's in my book, but it's really how I live. And I call it Millionaire Inner Zone. It's living in the zone. It's living in the flow of life. And in that way of looking at life, if we're making, this is my assumption, cannot prove it, believe it to be 100% true, that if we're living from true, open, present authenticity, that whatever we need and whatever all the different souls, I'm going to call them souls because at their deep level, whatever you mean by soul, we are all soul driven. That's who we are. Then I believe that not only do I or you, if you choose to live that way, but everybody with whom I come in contact gets exactly the experience that their soul needed. Now, their ego might be a little unhappy at times because the ego didn't get what the ego wanted, but that's a different question. I'm not so interested in the ego getting what the ego wants with me or anybody else. I'm interested in us all taking the journey that we're here to take. So when I made the decision to go back and take care of my dad, I can tell you with absolute certainty it was completely made with authenticity and that I knew that it was the right decision. So, did my life during that time period turn out really different than I expected it to? Yes. But did I get the experience that I believe prepared me for this moment in time so that I can now spread my wings and make my difference at an even bigger level? Yes, absolutely. So it depends on which game you want to play. Do you want to play the game called, I want my ego to get what my ego wants? Or do you want to play the game, I want to live the authenticity and truth of who I am and find my purpose and live that path? Because I can assure you they are not the same paths. And you have to decide which one you want to play. I obviously made my decision and I wouldn't, in that regard, would not have changed that decision. So I think that those are the bigger questions we have to ask. And that all comes into play around entrepreneurship.
Because even like, let's say an entrepreneur's like 35, and if they've been doing what you've been doing or 40 or 45 or even like 50 or 60, they could have, I mean, you could put it in quotes, right? Like the typical thing would be to say they wasted their life, but it's really like, I mean, they lived that experience. Now they can go do something else. Like they can adopt the conscious millionaire mindset at any point.
I want to point out something since I've been pulling back the curtain here, because I talked earlier, and I don't want to leave you, if you're listening to this, confused, that 12 years I stayed at the company after I finished my law degree and wanted to practice corporate and tax law. The reason I said that one's a more difficult one, going back when my dad got Parkinson's and making an authentic decision, that was very clean. I made that with a clean way. But staying that extra 12 years, there was a lot of, to be frank, manipulation from my dad for me to stay because he was afraid, because here we had accomplished this one level of lifestyle that we'd not had before. And he knew that I was the wizard who made it happen, right? And so he was emotionally manipulative. And that's why that was not really a clean, authentic decision. And so the deeper question for me, which is purely hypothetical at this point, because we can't go back and relive it, is what would have been the authentic decision in that moment? And whatever that would have been, that's what I would have preferred to have done. But of course, at this point, it's difficult to know what that would be years later. And so I hope that what you take away from what I'm discussing is that there are a lot of complexities, a lot of difficulties in some of the decisions we make, especially when they involve family or obligation or love or, even friendship. But the real question is, are you coming to this decision and making it with authenticity, with realness, with feeling that you're being present and that you're making a decision that feels like it's the right direction that you're supposed to be taking with your life? And if you make that decision, whatever decision it is, I believe your life will move forward at the highest possible level than if you make a decision that isn't true and that isn't true for you, that isn't authentic for you.
As long as you're making the right decision in the moment. Because even if you're getting, like, I've been in manipulative relationships as well. And like, I always think while I'm in there that I'm doing the right thing for me. But then there's like a gut feeling, I guess is how you're supposed to know that you're doing it wrong. But I guess as long as you're making the right decision for you in that moment, then you should be fine.
Your journey will be right for you. It may or may not feel fine initially, but your journey will be right for you. And I think this goes, I want to circle back to what I discussed earlier, that you have to decide which game you want to play. Is it fulfill my ego, or is it live my purpose and take my soul's journey? And it's difficult to do both. In fact, it's impossible. So I'll give you an example. Let's talk about becoming famous. So there's the ego reason to become famous. And really, the ego reason to become famous is to finally feel like you're somebody. That's really what that journey is about. Then there's the soul or more purpose reason for becoming famous. And that's because it gives you more connections, it gives you more access, it gives you more ability to impact the world at higher levels. Those are very different outcomes from the same fame, right? Because you have a different reason for accomplishing it. And that can go for making money, no matter how much that money is. If it's the ego reason, it's the Lamborghini. And there's nothing wrong with Lamborghinis. I love cars. But if that's why you're doing it, then you just need to own that it's just the ego. And the problem with that journey, having taken it, so I had a chance to make new decisions, right? I've taken ego journeys. So I want to say, I'm not criticizing anybody who does. It's a learning experience, and you just have to decide whether you want to keep on taking those or you'd like something else out of life, is that they're very empty and meaningless. That's what I learned. And what I've observed is the people who are taking them and they buy the mansion because they got to have the mansion are missing the whole boat. They're missing the whole boat of why we're alive. And I rewrote my book 7 times. 4 times it had the same first sentence, including the last time. So I want to give you that sentence because it really kind of defines what we're talking about here. And the reason I made it the first sentence is that statistically, depending on what you read, it's somewhere between 18 and 30 pages is what 90% of the people who buy a book are going to read. So I wanted to make sure my first chapter had something valuable in it because I knew, 9 out of 10 people weren't reading the second chapter. So the first sentence is, if you miss your real journey, you miss your real life. And so you have to decide, did you want to get the real journey or do you just want to play an ego game? But the two are completely different.
That's huge. If you miss your real journey, you miss your real life. This whole thing is so interesting. What a great episode, I gotta say. No, because what you're pointing out is like, it's all the different paths you can take in life. And I just love the idea that you've experienced all this stuff before. And yet, and you come back with the same sort of takeaways that, we've heard before, which is like buying cars doesn't really matter too much. Like having a big house doesn't really matter. It's much better to, sounds like just invest in the world, like try to deliver some kind of massive value to people.
Yeah. And I do want to be clear. I'm not saying if the mansion is the authentic decision, make it. It's just know why you're making these decisions and what it is that you want out of it and what purpose it serves. And it could be that you want the mansion and you want to do a whole lot of workshops at your home, or you want to invite a lot of people to come stay with you at various times. I mean, or it just surrounds you with the beauty and the sanctity and the privacy that you need in order to operate at your highest level. But it's, why are you making the decisions? What's the purpose of the decisions that's really going to drive the quality of your life and ultimately the quality of your business?
I live in a 2-bedroom apartment right now. And so I walked out of my room the other day and I was like, oh, I should probably get a mansion. Is this why rich people have mansions? So they can just look out at the thing and just think how successful they are. And I had to stop that thought. It seems like that's a huge ego trap to just get a big house for no reason. What you just said, I think, is key, because I don't know how many people think about wanting to buy a mansion so they can host people, or like a use besides wanting to buy a mansion so then they feel good every time they look out the window.
That's really the role beauty plays, and why I'm going to the art walk tonight. I don't acquire art so that I can own art. I acquire art so that I have beauty that's reflecting back to me and uplifting me. That's the purpose of art.
All right, JV, where's the best place for people to check you out online?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'd love you to come check out Conscious Millionaire podcast. We've got over 1,800 episodes. So there's something there for you to listen to, I hope. And you can find that at Conscious Millionaire Show, or just go to consciousmillionaire.com. You'll see the podcast tab. And if you'd like to get the 7-figure formula about how to get to your first million, we help people who either want to get to their first million or they want to achieve their next million, and they want to do it by making a positive impact. You can go to consciousmillionaire.com/7-figure formula. And I'd always love to hear from you.
For Conscious Millionaire, if you guys want to listen to the one me and JV did, whenever that's live, that would be a good episode to start with.
Yes, because you were a wonderful guest, and I really appreciated you taking time and being on the show.
For sure. All right, JV, thanks for being here.
Thank you. And listen, thanks to all of you for listening today.
You've heard that it's important to test your cold email subject lines to get an 80% open rate. And we've been able to achieve that pretty consistently for our clients selling into the top companies, billion-dollar brands. So how do we do that? The trick is to test a new subject line every 10 emails. The hardest part for us was coming up with these subject lines. But lucky for you, we have 50 plus subject lines in a Google Doc that you can test with your cold email campaigns. And best part, you can have that for free. To get this list of 50 plus email subject lines, go over to experiment27.com/subject. Again, that's experiment27.com/subject.